Nation of Fit in 10, welcome to day 21, and we are officially 30% through this challenge. And if you have not booked your second scan, please do so. They're happening next week, Wednesday and Thursday. Book your scan at www.calendly.com/train on Main. Calendly.com/train on Main. Book it. Let's see how you are doing. This weekend I wanted to have a scan, but just based on the spring cut info session and the classes and everything, I'm not going to do it. And I'm not going to do it next weekend because it's a long weekend, but I am going to do it the end of week 5, I guess that is. So we'll have another meeting. We'll have another get together. We'll go through some more questions. We'll go through a couple topics that I think are important, and it'll allow us to just do a little regroup. Of course, I am going to see you next week for your scan, so that will be good to see you all one-on-one. Today, I want to talk to you about cardio for fat loss, if we want to call it that, sure. Really, we can think about cardio for energy burning. Some of that energy is going to be fat. So let's talk about it. There's a few different categories of cardio that I'll talk about. We could probably categorize cardio in various boxes, however specific we want to be. But before I do any of that, let me just go through and kind of give you a little bit of a background, perhaps, on the difference between cardio and weights. Now, you might already know why. Weights, we're in there in the gym, we're lifting weights, we're lifting things that are, fairly heavy. In cardio, I'm just kind of running around. It's not really as intense per se, and this is all very true. In fact, when you're lifting weights, it is in fact that intensity that really defines the difference between that and cardio. So weights are still cardio, they're just not as cardio, well, let's be more specific, they're not as cardiovascular, they're not as heart, they're not as energy, they're not as blood pumping as cardiovascular exercise is, our typical cardiovascular exercises we would know it, but there still is some cardiovascular work going on. But what really defines the difference between doing resistance-based training, or what we would term resistance-based training, or weight training, versus cardio, is the fact that we deplete ATP in the muscles, which, okay, what does that mean? It just means the type of energy we use. So we use this thing called ATP when we need to produce a lot of force on demand. So why do we have ATP? Because we cannot produce all that force on demand from the other stores of energy that fast. So it's all about energy per unit of time. So if we need to do a lot, if we need a huge, we gotta lift something heavy off the floor. How do we do that? We produce a lot of force. What does that mean? It means we have to output a lot of energy fast. We can't do this by trying to, break down sugar, get sugar into the cell, or break down fat, or break down proteins, or whatever. We need ATP for this. And so the ATP storage areas are small. This is why when we lift heavy weights, we fatigue very fast. All right, but it's not to say that weights are not also cardiovascular. Of course, you've done weights. You've done a set of 10 reps of squats, and your heart rate is racing. When you do cardio, we don't use up ATP, or we use up a very small amount of it. We certainly don't use it all up. And so what we rely on more is energy coming from glucose, depending on the intensity here, energy coming from glucose, sugar, or fat, our fat stores, primarily. Okay, these are the two things. You could argue perhaps there's going to be some protein breakdown, but even with protein breakdown, that protein just gets converted to glucose through a very arduous process. So that's essentially the difference. One requires ATP primarily to get the job done, the other one doesn't. That's really the difference. Now, when we talk about cardio, this is the way I would kind of look at it. We have lower intensity cardio, and with lower intensity cardio, this is obviously when we don't need as much energy per unit of time, which means we're If we're using running as an example here, if we're running at a very slow pace, let's say we're jogging, or maybe even just power walking, we don't need as much energy per unit of time, and therefore we end up actually utilizing more fat as the energy source. But overall, we don't burn as much energy per unit of time. So we would call this more low intensity type training. We've got something HIIT, high intensity training. And obviously with higher intensity, we need more energy per unit of time because we're going to be moving faster. So let's say we are jogging really fast, or maybe we are sprinting. Obviously, if we're sprinting, we need a lot of energy on demand, not as much, maybe a little bit more from ATP, of course, but we're not depleting ATP. But we're utilizing a lot of those, a lot of energy more from sugar and less fat. All right, so, as we go through, if we look at super high intensity lifting weights, we're using ATP. If we look at high intensity cardio, so not as intense as weights, because we don't need to output as much energy, we're burning more sugar. If we look at low intensity exercise, we're burning more, large percentage of the energy is coming from fat. Okay, but per unit of time, as we go through each of these, we're burning more energy, right? Because we need more energy. We need more energy for that, or in that moment. Low intensity cardio is great because it's something that we can keep doing. We can go for walks every day. We could probably jog every day, or some of us could. Maybe some of us would have to build up to it, because the intensity is not very high. If we choose to do high intensity cardio, you guys are doing high intensity cardio, maybe not doing that high because your heart rate values aren't that high right now. But ultimately, this takes a toll. It also takes a toll on the nervous system, and this requires some recovery. So we want to be careful when we do high intensity cardio. Of course, weights, we know we need recovery. Okay, just as important, the muscles as the nervous system. The nervous system is what's driving our muscles to contract. Essentially, it is the brain, so to speak. Well, our brain is part of our nervous system, but for lack of better words, it is the brain behind the movement, right? But for things that require high intensity cardio or weights, this is why we need more recovery, and this is why we can get away with walking every day. All right, and we'll talk about this, or I'll kind of address this a little bit when we talk about the exit strategy and the challenge when it comes to cardio. Okay, so cardio, more than anything, we're burning energy. How much energy? Depends on the intensity, and it obviously depends on the amount of time that we're doing it for. When we're lifting weights, yeah, we're still burning a lot of energy depending on what we're doing, how long we're training for. It's just that we have to take these breaks, right? We tend to take these breaks, we have to take these breaks because our ATP stores deplete, and we need to let the ATP stores build up again. All right, and this is why as we go through our weight training session, we get more and more tired, and we become less and less strong because we're slowly, we're unable to, regenerate that ATP as we were in the beginning of the workout, and certainly not to the same degree as when we walked into the workout. Okay, so a little bit of background there. There's more I can say on this, but hopefully that gives you some understanding and some bigger picture of what's happening when we're doing weights versus, say, sprinting or cycling really hard versus, say, jogging, versus walking, and what it means in terms of the type of energy we're burning, etc. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about this more tomorrow. Okay, 9.5 minutes. Let's get to the message of the day quickly here. 5 things that require zero talent, because you might believe that in order to do well in this challenge, you have to be super talented, which is just not the case. So here are 5 things that require zero talent. Following a system, like the Fit in 10. Being organized, like you should be in the Fit in 10. Putting in effort, like you should be doing in the Fit in 10. Being prepared. You ought to be prepared. Prepping your food, writing in the days that you're going to do your your workouts and your cardio and being prepared, having things ready to go, so that you can fulfill these appointments, right? And finally, a positive attitude. You definitely need zero talent to be positive, right? To think positive, to have a positive aspect. Which reminds me, we're going to talk about being thankful here soon. Okay, so 5 things that require zero talent: following a system, organization, level of effort, being prepared, and of course, a positive attitude. Positive energy, positive vibes, believe in yourself, for love God, give some gratitude, and I'll talk to you all very soon.